first thing I did was I wrote this script. I was like 20 or 21 years old. And I said kind of like, this is for me. You know, I got to figure out a way to make movies. The movie that got made, the first one that got made was Wise Guys. The Brian De Palma movie with Danny DeVito and Joe Piscopo. And I wrote that when I was about 27. I actually wrote Bad Boys before I wrote Midnight Run. Bad Boys was Paramount purchased the screenplay, and it was a pitch that I had, and I pitched it to Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, and Don was great, and may he rest in peace. He really, Don was one of those guys where you could go sit down with him, and he was very fast, you know, and he didn't want. It's so much different today where you do the very detailed pitch. And you say the guy drives a red Chevy and, you know, wears a blue suit. I mean, they want it, today they want everything and they still don't know. I mean, it's a whole different business. Don would say, what's the story in 25 words or less? If you could tell it in 25 words or less and he could see a movie, he'd say, fine, go write it. Here's a check, go write it. And it was real old Hollywood stuff, you know, which, again, it's not like that today. Today it's committees and this and that. And, you know, by the time you get the job, you're like, why did I want to do this in the first place? It doesn't even resemble what I had in my head, you know. But so I wrote Bad Boys first, and Marty Brest, who had just done Beverly Hills Cop for Don and Jerry, they gave him a script to read when I handed it in to them, and he didn't want to do another cop movie because he just did a cop movie. So the way Midnight Run happened is like one of those strange things. I'd seen Marty around the lot, the Paramount lot, and I didn't know him. And I was walking, I remember I had a meeting with Don and Jerry, and this fate. I was walking to my car, and I forgot something, and I went back to the office and got it, to Don and Jerry's office. And as I'm walking back, who comes through the parking lot but Marty Brest? So I figure, well, you know, I'll break his chops a little bit, you know. So, and we hit it off instantly. So I said, hey, Marty, I understand you read my script. And he goes, yeah, it was a really good script. He said, but I just don't want to do another cop movie. And he said, what else have you got? And I said, I've got this half-baked thing in my head about a bounty hunter. And he was like, oh, what? There still are bounty hunters today? And I was like, yeah, believe it or not, there are. And they still operate under like some obscure law from like 1853, because it's you're kidnapping somebody, and but you're doing it because someone hired you to do it. So it's a weird law, you know. And if you read it, it's like something right out of the Wild West. If one man pays another man, you know, to capture a third man, you know. Anyway, but anyway. And so Marty says, well, tell me about it. So we went back to his office, and I sat down, and I said, look, this is all I've got. I've got this guy, and and the guy's an accountant, and he gave money to you know, he stole money, and he gave it out to charity, but because he found that he was working for a mob accountant firm, which is something I read about in the paper. There was a guy that was working for a mob boss and didn't realize he was doing his books. I thought that was an interesting character idea. Gave it out to charity. I mean, basically the story of Midnight Run.
It was foolish. But taking $15 million of mob money and giving it to charity was good for a lot of people.
Oh, so you pissed off a mafioso killer just to be loved by a bunch of fucking strangers. That makes a lot of sense.
Don't you want to?
And Marty said, it sounds great. And I remember I was sitting, there's a coffee shop not far from here. You know, there were no cell phones then. And then I was checking in my messages at home, and one of them was, Robert De Niro wants to do Midnight Run. And I was like, I hung up. It was my agent. I hung up and I was like, Robert De Niro? I mean, this is a fucking comedy. And I was like, really? Then I was like, well, that could be a brilliant idea. I just never, but you know, because Jack Walsh, that character was such a, you know, he was such a pent up guy. I was thinking like, that's fucking genius, you know? So I started telling my friends, they were like, get the fuck out of here. I'm like, no, for real. It's like, it's the message I got. So anyway, then I met Bob, and he couldn't have been nicer, and then started the whole process of who was going to play the role of Jonathan Mardukas, and every actor in town came in and read for that part. I mean, at one point, I remember Cher had just come off of Moonstruck, right, and won the Academy Award, and Paramount was pushing Marty very hard to cast Cher in the role of the Charles Grodin part. And I mean, really pushing hard. And to the point where I remember we were sitting around in his office. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning because we were always working on the script. And he goes, what do you think of Cher? And I'm like, and I remember saying to Marty, Well, it's a different movie to say the least. And I mean, De Niro's going to say to Cher, "I'm going to stick your head in a fucking toilet bowl and make it stay there." I says, well, and he was like, "You're right, God damn it." I mean, he, I think for like one maybe hair of a second, he was considering.
If I hear any more shit out of you, I'm gonna fucking bust your head and I'm gonna put you back in that fucking hole and I'm gonna stick your head in the fucking toilet bowl and I'm gonna make it stay there.
I mean, I had no idea who that actor should be. But when Grodin came into the room and sat next to De Niro, and he started fucking with him, it's like you knew instantly, oh my God, this is just great. He was just, he did this sort of repelled kind of thing where he was staring at Bob, and I mean, you knew instantly, oh my God, this is it.
And I'm not very popular with the Chicago Police Department, okay?
Why aren't you popular with Chicago Police
That's
Department?
a whole other... What, do we know each other?
Why?
Why?
Marty said, I want Charles Grodin to play the part, because I think they did a screen test. And Paramount wanted to, starfuck the movie, and Marty said, no, that's not what I want to do. This is the movie I want to make. And then he called Casey Silver at Universal, who was the president, I think, at the time, and it was like Thursday. This is no bullshit. Thursday we were at Paramount, and Friday we were at Universal. And then Marty said, you're coming with me. We're gonna go make the movie, and I need you there every day. And I was like, okay, great.
Looks like a package deal to me, Marvin.
God damn it. Come on, both of you.
I have to tell you, Marty is the most, I have so much respect for him. I mean, during the course of that movie, I was young, and he was breaking my balls a lot, okay? But he made me the best writer I could be. It was never good enough, to the point, like, I wanted to fucking choke him, okay? But he was like, is this the best you could do? Well, if it's not the best you could do, why did you give it to me? I mean, he would just, I'd be like, I'm trying to work out some ideas, and he's just tough. But he is steadfastly committed to making it great, and nothing will get in his way. He just is very, very tough, and I guess could be perceived as difficult. But he's only difficult to the people who don't appreciate what he's doing and how much he gives a shit about what he's doing. So I guess, yeah, if you want something to be great, right, and you could be perceived as difficult, but I'm all for it. He really, that movie is what it is because of him, and that's the truth.
You just said you were hurt.
I'm not hurt.
You just said you were hurt.
I didn't say I was hurt. You said I was hurt.
I asked you if you were hurt, and you said, yeah, I'm hurt.
That's because you made me say. You're starting to put words in my mouth.
Jack, you're a grown man. You have control over your own words.
You're goddamn right I do. So here come 2 words for you. Shut the fuck up.
Midnight Run is a comedy, and yes, it's a comedy. And it's the kind of stuff that I prefer to write. Afterwards, I got pulled more and more into the genre of comedy, and I have to tell you how many people don't understand comedy. If the situation is funny, okay, and the actors are playing it totally straight, you laugh. If you start like piling on this sort of isn't it funny kind of, the thing becomes self-aware and goofy to me, and I don't find it funny anymore.
Well then, you got me. Inspector, shut up.
Marty has a tremendous strength that, and I if I could pat myself on the back, I guess it could be perceived as a strength. I guess it would be, but we love characters. Marty and I would sit around and talk about people we grew up with. And there was this guy, Marty, Mr. Reitman, I think was his name, where he used to throw cherry bombs out of his window and just scare the shit out of some old guy, walking home at night. And we would just tell stories of our childhood and all these people we grew up around. And Marty grew up in the Bronx, so I grew up in Portchester, so we grew up around these very sort of ethnic neighborhoods, and these places are just chock filled with these characters. Like my dad was a character. My uncle was a habitual gambler, and always at the track, and and my mom was a character. And to put up with all of this, and there's just a lot of fighting going on all the time, but a lot of love at the same time. Like people would literally tell each other they go fuck themselves, and 2 seconds later they're hugging and kissing. It didn't mean anything. It was just a lot of noise, And so so Marty and I loved talking about people. So down to the smallest detail, we enjoyed the notion of these people having lives, you know what I mean, having backstories. Even if you're on screen for a minute, you know, or 30 seconds, you're still a person with a backstory. You're a real human being. You know, you're not a person just saying a few lines. And so we talked about that a lot. I mean, if I may take credit, Yaphet Kotto was my idea. I said to Marty, when I wrote it, I was thinking of Yaphet Kotto.
His real name's Mosley.
I'm Mosley!
The funniest thing about, like, the Alonzo Mosley character, for instance, is that basically he doesn't crack a smile, you know, until near the end. And I said to Marty, I said, look, man, if I was on the run, Yaphet Kotto, there's just nothing, there's like no nonsense with Yaphet Kotto. And if Yaphet Kotto was a Fed, you know, I would be very nervous about that, you know. And Yaphet's the sweetest man in the world, but when he's on camera, he's just got that tough fucking persona where, like, if you make a joke, he'll just keep staring at you. Like, he's just not going to break.
Why don't you quit? Be cheaper for both of us.
And for Dorfler, Marty had done Beverly Hills Cop. I was thinking of John Ashton, but I was thinking of the John Ashton character had he in Beverly Hills Cop, had he kind of been slightly behind every conversation, you know, like, but I liked something about John Ashton.
Who the fuck are you? Are you writing a book? Who the fuck are you?
Dennis was a good friend. You know, he died about 6 months ago. Yeah, Dennis was great. For that part, I know they read a lot of people, and Dennis was on Crime Story, I think, the TV show. He was an ex-cop, ex-Chicago cop, but I don't know what he'd done before. That was sort of, I think, a big role for him, like a breakout role. He was great. I liked Dennis a lot.
I got a problem. I can't fly. I don't think you're taking me seriously.
I don't like to fly, and I don't know if you know that about me. I mean, I have done it a few times since Midnight Run, but I don't like it. I almost fucked everything up for myself. I remember I was supposed to meet with Marty in Chicago because he was on a location scout, and we started shooting in New York. And he goes, meet me in Chicago, and then we'll take the plane to New York, and then you know, we'll get you in the hotel room, and then let's start going over the script. And I remember the day that I was supposed to go to Chicago, I said, nah, I can't go. You know, and I called him up and I said, I can't get on the plane. And he was like, are you out of your fucking mind? And I was like, dude, I got a problem with this. That's why I wrote this script. Why do you think I know what Amarillo, Texas looks like? I mean, because I've driven this freaking trip 1,000 times. You know, I've been on the train. You know, I mean, I know these fucking places. You know, I know where they are. You know, I know what the coffee shops look like. Because, you know, I've stopped in all of them. And he goes, Judge, you're nuts. This is like your big break. And I'm like, I know, but I'm not getting on a plane. I can't do it, all right? So he was just beside himself. And again, so I took an Amtrak. I remember Universal made some sort of a phone call where they said that they were booked. And they were like, it was like a Ray Donovan phone call, you know, the show Ray Donovan, where they said, no, you're not. You know, you got room for somebody on that train. And they go, no, we don't. They go, yeah, you do. And I was on the train. I had a nice suite, you know, and I went to New York and I met Marty there. And then I was with them the whole time.
What the fuck are you smiling about?
I love to travel by train.
Oh, yeah? What do you think this is, a class trip?
Part of why I think that script was so good was that I didn't know what I was doing in a way. Or I shouldn't say that. I knew what I was doing in terms that I had a love for film, but I had no real clue as to what it took to shoot these scenes. You know, like, oh, they fall in the rapids. Yeah, they can swim and they can fight in the rapids. That'll be great. Now that I've directed 9 movies myself. Now knowing, like, rapids, are you fucking nuts? Do you know how hard it is to shoot in rapids? You know, you naively write about blizzards and things. Oh, it's the worst blizzard ever. Do you know what it's like to shoot in a blizzard and faking snow and wind, and then you got to loop everybody afterwards because of the fans, you know? But you don't think of those things when you're, at least I didn't. I was a young writer, and I didn't know that much about how movies are made. I could see it, but they fall off a 80-foot cliff into the rapids, and then they go down the rapids, and then they fight in the rapids, and then one guy grabs a log, and the other guy comes by and grabs them, and off they go, and then but That's like a week to shoot that, you know? And then the guy's hanging on a rock, and then the other guy hands him a log, and where are you gonna put the fucking camera? You gotta put it in the water, so you gotta build a thing for the crew to go out to shoot up back. I mean, you know, it's like I didn't think of those things. You know, but anyway.
All right, I promise. I'll let you go.
I think he was deadly serious. You know, he's a very serious guy in a lot of ways, you know? But I think with me, I have to say I have a very warm place in my heart for him, you know, even though, you know, it's not like we talk a lot. We talk from time to time. But I for some reason, he responds to honesty, and he hates bullshit as far as I could tell. I mean, just despises it. So he always seemed to have a twinkle in his eye, you know, like when I was telling him stories, because he too, like Marty, just loves people and loves characters, loves what makes them tick. So, like, whenever I would talk about people, you know, or he would light up, you know. No, we had a lot of fun, actually. Because we would go out to dinner at night, sometimes just he and I. When I think about it, what the fuck? I was like 31 years old, and, you know, still, you know, as my art teacher used to say, wiping my own ass was a recent development, you know? I mean, I was a young guy, and I was sitting at the table with Robert De Niro, and he'd call me up and say, George, let's grab something to eat. And I'm like, okay, and I'd hang up. That's Robert De Niro. He's gonna, what the fuck does he want to hang out with me for, you know? But, I mean, honestly, just being, you know, totally honest. And but we'd go have dinner and just laugh and just tell dopey stories to each other, you know?
All right, in 10 minutes, we'll be at the Western Union office. We'll have $500. I'll buy you a nice juicy steak or whatever you want, okay?
3 salt eggs.
Huh?
3 salt eggs.
I'll get you whatever you want.
A lot of that script really was written the way it was written, and I mean, was what was shot. I was watching them all the time, so the more I got to watch them, the more I got to write things for them, you know. But some of that stuff was written like on the spot. Like, for instance, when De Niro says, you know, it's a $10 fine for jaywalking in Los Angeles, you know that part where they drag? That I came up with right off the top of my head. I was on the set watching him, and I said, they're jaywalking. So he goes, what do I say? What do I say? He said, there's a $10 fine for jaywalking in Los Angeles. And he goes, great, you know. So a lot of that stuff I was just because I knew them and I felt comfortable enough to, you know, come up with stuff. Because like I say, I got to know them. I got to spend time with them.
You're okay, Jack. I think under different circumstances, you and I probably still would have hated each other.
There's a lot of sentiment in that movie. You know, it's counterbalanced by other things. You know, it's like a lot of times with making a movie, you can get sentimental, which the movie does, if there's something to balance it, which is all the cursing and the, you know, and that, you know, that sort of, it's that nasty sort of thing that balances it out, so it's not just all syrupy. We were driving to shoot the scene where De Niro shoots down the helicopter on the Snake River Canyon, it's called. And I was watching the dailies every day, and I was watching Billy Weber was cutting it. And this is back when there was no DVDs, it was VCRs. He was sending tapes of the scenes he had cut. And I remember I was in the car, and I said to myself, if I say this, 2 things can happen. One thing certainly is if I don't have an answer to what I'm about to say, I could not get kicked off my movie, but another writer could come in if I can't solve the issue that I'm about to bring up. And I said to Marty, I think John Ashton is too lovable as Dorfler. I think he's too lovable as Dorfler to get killed. Because in the original screenplay, Dorfler got killed in the end. It had a different ending. The scene where he hands over the money and asks for more money, and then they see the picture, the way it was written in the script, they had fucking had it with him, okay? And they shot him in the parking lot. They were just done with him, and now they knock him out instead. And it had a different ending at the airport. So it's a darker ending. It was a darker script, a little bit of a darker script. The movie was supposed to take a shift where you went like, holy shit, you know? And Marty turned around, he goes, you're right, I'm thinking the same thing. I remember this clearly. He was like in the front seat. He goes, "You're right." And so now he goes, "You got to come up with another ending." And I was like, "Okay, great." I just fucked myself, you know what I mean? And then I knew if I didn't come up with something, I'd be on the phone with William Goldman, you know, before my body hit the ground, you know. So I gotta come up with something. And I remember I was working on it and working on it and working on it, and I know. And Marty, God bless him, he hung in there with me because I kept saying, "Marty, I can figure this out." And I remember I gave him, I came back and I gave him a bunch of pages. And then Dorfler shows up at the airport. That whole thing where he fucks up the ending, that I wrote that over the Christmas holidays. And I was with my wife when I came up with that too. I remember I was saying, what can I do? Maybe he shows up at the airport and jam cars the whole thing up. And then before you know. And I gave Marty the pages, and he looked at me and he goes, "You don't know how close you came." You know, I mean, to getting booted off of this, and I knew it, you know. But he hung in there, and so then we went and shot it.
You sick and fucking you look up! Serrano's got the disc! Serrano's got the disc!
Move in.
I remember the first time I saw it all cut together, I was like, "Holy shit, this thing is good," you know. I knew when I wrote it. I mean, for what it's worth, I literally, when I was finished with the last draft of it, I said, I can't do any better. I mean, I bled, I wrung out everything I had into it, you know. And I was also nervous. I said, if this thing goes down the toilet, then I'm really fucked, because I gave it all I had. Like, emotionally, I felt like I'd be, you know, sort of broken up, you know. But it was so well received. You know, the critics loved it. I mean, I think there was only one bad review out of like hundreds and hundreds, you know. So yeah, I felt real good. It did well. It came out the same day as Die Hard. So, and I remember, strangely enough, the producer of Die Hard called Marty, because everyone said Midnight Run was going to be the thing that was going to blow up, you know. And the producer said, "Could you move the date? Because we're nervous. We don't want to open a Bruce Willis movie against a Robert De Niro movie," because Bruce still hadn't. That was his bust out movie, Die Hard, and then Die Hard ended up doing better than Midnight Run. But Midnight Run, I mean, you know, on a dollar per dollar, I mean, they made 5 of them, right? I mean, there weren't 4 more Midnight Runs. But I don't know what you would do with Midnight Run again. I mean, there was some talk of a sequel recently, and I don't know what you would do. That story to me seems so contained. You know, and when it's over, it's really over. And, you know, I mean, look, from a commerce point of view, maybe the movie has such a following now that a sequel would be fun. But man, you know, at one point when they first asked me, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I mean, first of all, thank God, I've been married to the same woman for 31 years, so it's not like I went through like 16 divorces and I went through all my money, and I'll write anything to make a buck at this point. I mean, I really, you know, we saved our money, and, you know, we did pretty well, and then, you know, I didn't have, like, you know, so bad a drug habit that I went through all my money, you know. And I mean, you know, the 80s are gone. I survived them, you know. You know, so I wasn't sure what you could do, because it kind of, the fun of that, it'd be like making a sequel to Casablanca. I mean, it's like, you know, not that I'm saying Midnight Run is Casablanca. You know, Gallo says Midnight Run is Casablanca. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that when they walked off in the end, it was over. You know, I don't know what happened to them. I hope that they fared well in life, you know, but I don't really kind of want to know what happened. So to me, it'd be like taking a shit on something, you know.
See you in the next life. See you in the next life.
Midnight Run became such a part of the lexicon. So, I mean, if you get to do that once in your life, you're lucky, you know. Yeah, it was a great time. I wished I could go back and tell that younger kid, you know, this is about as good as it's ever going to get. You know, it's like fucking sop up every moment like a biscuit in gravy, you know. But I was a young guy, you know. I mean, just running around having fun, and maybe I experienced it the way I should have, you know. I just enjoyed it, you know.